Under the blinding, almost surgical glare of the Fox News studio lights, a wave of thunderous applause washed over Caroline Levit. The air itself seemed to crackle with an almost palpable electricity, the collective anticipation of the audience a heavy, held breath. They had come for the usual spectacle, a sharp, incisive political interview from the White House press secretary, a woman renowned for her razor-sharp wit, unyielding loyalty, and formidable ability to dissect policy with surgical precision, effortlessly parrying every journalistic thrust. Sean Hannity, with the practiced ease of a seasoned conductor, was poised to guide the conversation through the familiar, well-worn channels of Washington, D.C. power plays and policy debates. Yet from the very instant Caroline stepped onto the meticulously arranged set, a subtle, unsettling discord vibrated through the otherwise perfectly orchestrated broadcast. Caroline's smile, though meticulously sharp at the corners, failed to truly reach her eyes, which held an unusual, almost distant unease. She bypassed the customary pre-interview banter with Hannity, her gaze unnervingly fixed, returning again and again to a single, unassuming object resting on the gleaming interview table. It was an old envelope, its parchment yellowed with age, lying silently next to a sparkling glass of water. Its deep red Vatican wax seal, an ancient emblem of authority and secrecy, glowed like a dormant ember, a mystery patiently waiting to be awakened. Hannity, with the instincts of a veteran journalist, sensed the subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere. He attempted to keep the conversation light, a seasoned host trying to coax his guest back to the established script. "Hello, everyone. Tonight we have a special guest, White House Press Secretary Caroline Levit. Thank you for being here, Caroline." She offered a brief, almost perfunctory nod, her voice a soft murmur. "Thank you, Sean." Hannity continued, his tone calm but laced. "With a pointed curiosity, you've been shaking up the political scene from the Trump campaign to major policy decisions. But today, what do we want to hear from you? A fresh perspective on the White House, or something else?" A ripple of polite, expected chuckles spread through the audience, but Caroline remained unyielding, her expression unchanging, a stark contrast to the light-hearted moment. Then, a deep breath, almost imperceptible, swelled her chest, and she cut in, her voice, though quiet, carrying an undeniable weight that instantly silenced the studio. "I'm not here to talk politics, Sean." The statement hung in the air, a stark, unexpected declaration that shattered the carefully constructed facade of a routine interview. Hannity's eyebrow arched, a flicker of genuine surprise in his eyes, but his voice remained remarkably steady. "Pope Francis, promise, you're making the world curious, Caroline." Caroline's eyes, now resolute, met his, though a slight, almost imperceptible tremor in her voice betrayed the immense pressure she was under. "He entrusted me with a secret, and tonight I'm breaking that silence." A collective murmur swept through the audience, a wave of disbelief quickly giving way to burgeoning excitement. Phones, previously forgotten in pockets and purses, were now discreetly raised, their screens glowing in the dim studio, capturing every nuanced expression. The envelope on the table, once a mere prop, seemed to radiate a strange, magnetic pull, drawing every single gaze to Caroline, who now held a truth never before revealed to the world. This was no longer a routine interview. It was transforming before their very eyes into something entirely different, a live revelation, an untold secret, and a truth long concealed, finally brought into the harsh light of public scrutiny. The atmosphere, once merely electric, had become taut with an almost sacred anticipation, as if everyone present was on the precipice of a profound, world-altering confession. "It started not long ago," Caroline began, her voice a low, steady current that seemed to pull the entire studio into the swirling vortex of her memory. It was a calm, that belied the incredible weight of the tale, a quiet power that commanded absolute silence from the captivated audience. I received an invitation, not through the usual channels of official White House correspondence, not via encrypted email or diplomatic pouch, but a handwritten letter, delivered by a priest in person. A collective gasp rippled through the room, a shared recognition of the sheer improbability of such an event. It came from him, Pope Francis. The murmurs intensified, a low hum of disbelief, but Caroline seemed utterly oblivious, her gaze fixed on a point beyond the studio lights, lost in the vivid reliving of that extraordinary clandestine moment. She sank deeper into her recollections, her voice growing more vivid, each word a brushstroke painting the scene, as if every detail of that night was being re-etched onto the present. "I was in Rome at the time, accompanying President Trump's delegation," she continued, her narrative unfolding with meticulous precision. "We were at the Vatican to discuss religious freedom, a topic I'd spoken about extensively during the campaign. I thought I was merely a small cog in the vast machine of international diplomacy, a spokesperson positioned discreetly behind the spotlight, another transient face in the endless procession of official visits." Her gaze became distant, almost ethereal, as if she were watching the past unfold before her very eyes. But then one evening, while I was at the hotel, a priest knocked on my door. He didn't introduce himself, offered no preamble, simply handed me an envelope. Inside was a small note, written in a slanted, almost hurried black ink. "I wish to meet you, just the two of us at Casa Santa Marta. Come at midnight. Signed, Francis." Hannity, his professional skepticism momentarily forgotten, leaned forward, his eyes wide with an almost childlike wonder. "A personal invitation from the Pope? How did you feel, Caroline?" Caroline offered a faint, almost wistful smile, a fleeting expression that did little to conceal the profound confusion and disbelief that had gripped her at the time. "I honestly thought it was a joke, Sean, or a colossal mistake. I'm just a girl from New Hampshire, a political operative, not someone with a foot in the Vatican, certainly not someone who receives midnight summons from the Holy See." Her voice remained steady, yet it was imbued with a raw, undeniable emotion that resonated deeply through the silent studio. But something about that letter, its stark sincerity, perhaps its sheer audacity, made me utterly unable to refuse. The decision, she implied, had been made not by logic or political calculation, but by an inexplicable, almost magnetic pull towards the unknown, a destiny she couldn't ignore. At the stroke of midnight, a plain black car, nondescript and utterly devoid of official markings, picked me up from the hotel, she recounted, the details adding layers to the already palpable clandestine atmosphere. No flashing lights, no security escort, just a silent driver navigating the labyrinthine streets of Rome. We drove through the narrow, winding alleys, past ancient buildings steeped in centuries of history, to a secluded side gate of the Vatican, a place where no tourists lingered, no cameras flashed, no prying eyes could witness our arrival. Another priest, equally silent and cloaked in shadow, led her through cold, echoing stone corridors, the flickering light from ancient torches, dancing on the walls, casting long, shifting shadows that seemed to whisper secrets of their own. The studio, captivated, transformed, becoming a sacred, hushed space, the audience holding its collective breath, hanging on her every word, transported to that secret encounter. Finally, I entered a small, unadorned room within Casa Santa Marta, and there he was, sitting on a simple wooden chair, dressed in a plain white cassock. Caroline described Pope Francis with a reverence so profound it bordered on awe, as if she were still processing the sheer enormity of the encounter. He looked smaller than I'd imagined, Sean, weary, as if the crushing weight of the entire world rested upon his frail shoulders. But his His eyes shone with an intensity that seemed to pierce through my very soul. A pause, as if she were still trying to comprehend the depth of what she'd witnessed that night. He stood, took my hand, and said, "Thank you for coming. Caroline, I heard your speech on faith and freedom. It wasn't like political words. It came from the heart." She paused again, the memory clearly powerful, almost overwhelming. We sat down, and he began to speak, not about the intricate dance of politics or the delicate balance of diplomacy, but about the church itself, about what he'd seen and felt from within its ancient walls. He said being Pope wasn't glory, but an immense crushing burden. Some days, he confided, I pray but hear only silence, not from God, Caroline, but from the very people I trust, those closest to me. Hannity interjected, his voice cautious, almost hesitant. You mean he felt alone? In the Vatican? Caroline nodded slowly, her eyes heavy with a profound understanding. More than alone, Sean. He spoke of shadows, deep and pervasive within the church, people who claimed God's name, who wore the vestments of faith, but acted solely for power, for illicit money, or for something far, far worse. He had tried to reform, he said, but every step felt like walking on thin ice, every effort met with unseen resistance. Her voice dropped, becoming almost a whisper, yet it filled every corner of the silent room. And then he looked straight at me, his gaze unwavering, and said, I need an outsider, Caroline. Someone with a voice strong enough to speak the truth, and I've chosen you. She reached out, her fingers lightly, almost reverently, touching the envelope on the table, as if to confirm its tangible presence, a physical link to that impossible night. He gave me this envelope, sealed with that deep red wax you see. He instructed, don't open it now, only open it when I'm gone. You'll know when the time comes. A tremor ran through her voice. I wanted to ask more, to demand answers, but he just smiled, placed a comforting hand on my shoulder and said, Faith isn't answers, Caroline. It's the courage to ask questions. Caroline recounted leaving Casa Santa Marta that night, her mind reeling, the city of Rome, and indeed the entire world, seeming utterly transformed. I returned to the hotel, the envelope in my bag like a heavy stone, its weight a constant physical reminder of the impossible trust placed upon me. I didn't know what he saw in me, a political spokesperson, not a theologian or a nun, but something in his voice, in the profound way he looked at me, made me feel I couldn't turn away, that I had to keep this sacred promise. The promise, unspoken yet profoundly understood, had been irrevocably made. After that impossible night in the Vatican, Caroline had desperately tried to convince herself that things would simply snap back into place, that the extraordinary encounter with Pope Francis was an isolated, surreal dream from which she had now awoken. She would resume her demanding high-stakes life as White House press secretary, face the relentless barrage of media questions, deftly defend the administration's policies, and somehow, miraculously, forget about the heavy, red-sealed envelope tucked away in her carry-on. But she was wrong. The return to normalcy was a cruel, fleeting illusion, shattered almost immediately by a series of strange, unsettling signs that began to disrupt the meticulously ordered chaos of her life, weaving a new, sinister thread into her existence. Mere week after her return from the Rome trip, a small, folded note materialized in her purse. She had no idea how it got there, how it had bypassed her layers of security, or who possessed the audacity and access to place it so intimately. Just a few lines written in an unfamiliar, stark blue ink, yet chillingly clear in its intent. Keep the envelope secret. Words kill faster than knives. She dismissed it instantly, a reflexive defense mechanism. It had to be a prank, a bizarre coincidence, perhaps a misguided and deeply inappropriate attempt at humor from a disgruntled colleague. But then, the notes began to multiply, appearing with an escalating frequency that defied rational explanation. One slipped under her hotel room door in D.C., seemingly out of thin air. Another arrived in her personal mail, addressed precisely, yet with no return address, the postmark curiously smudged and illegible. Each bore the same stark, chilling warning, a persistent, whispered threat. Stay silent or pay the price. The TC audience in the studio, listening intently to Caroline's recounting, began to murmur, a low, uneasy hum spreading through the room, a shared recognition of the creeping dread she was describing. Caroline, however, remained unwavering, her gaze still distant, lost in the chilling replay of her past. She described the insidious, suffocating feeling of being hunted, a chilling sensation that clung to her like a second skin, despite the fact that no one ever physically appeared before her. It was in the small, almost imperceptible details, the subtle shifts in her environment that only a mind stretched to its breaking point would notice. A nondescript black car parked for an unnaturally long time near her office building, its tinted windows offering no glimpse of its occupants, an unknown number flashing on her phone, only to be met with a soft, deliberate breathing on the other end before the line abruptly disconnected. She desperately tried to rationalize it away, to convince herself that the relentless pressure of her job was finally making her paranoid, that the exhaustion was conjuring shadows where none existed. She chalked it up to stress, to the inherent anxieties of a high-profile position, to anything but the truth that gnawed at her. But deep down, a cold, undeniable certainty settled in her gut. Something was profoundly, terrifyingly wrong. Hannity, his voice sharp and incisive, pierced through the narrative of her growing dread. "Did you report it to anyone, Caroline? The police or the White House security team?" Caroline shook her head slowly, a bitter, fleeting smile flickering across her lips, a ghost of the woman she used to be. "I wanted to, Sean. Every fiber of my being screamed to tell someone, to seek help, to make it stop." Her voice softened, becoming almost a confession, raw and vulnerable. "But I was scared that if I spoke up, someone would think I wasn't sane enough for this job, that the pressure had finally broken me, or worse, far worse, they'd come for the envelope." The thought of its contents, of the Pope's impossible trust, held her captive, a golden cage of responsibility. She had hidden it in a small, fireproof safe at home, tucked away in a forgotten corner of her closet. But every night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the safe felt less like a secure repository and more like a ticking bomb, its silent presence a constant throbbing reminder of the secret she carried, a weight that crushed her spirit. Her husband, perceptive and loving, noticed the subtle, alarming changes in her, the sleepless nights, the jumpiness, the way her eyes seemed to hold a distant, haunted look, as if she were seeing things he couldn't. He would ask if she was okay, if work was getting to her, and she would offer vague reassurances, a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes, a dismissive wave of her hand. How do you explain something you don't even fully understand? How do you articulate a clandestine midnight meeting with a dying pope, a sealed envelope of unknown contents, and the chilling, anonymous threats that had begun to shadow her every waking moment? The silence, she realized with a crushing certainty, was not just a burden she carried. It was a cage of her own making, built from fear and an impossible promise. Then one night, everything changed. It wasn't a subtle shift, a creeping dread like the anonymous notes, but an abrupt, seismic tremor that shook Caroline to her core. She had a dream, unlike any she had ever experienced before, a vivid, almost tactile vision that transcended the boundaries of sleep and reality. She saw herself standing in a vast, echoing hall, its marble walls gleaming with an ethereal, cold light. There were no chairs, no people, just an endless expanse of polished stone, and at the far end of the cavernous room, He stood there. Pope Francis. He wasn't wearing the familiar white cassock of the Vatican, the symbol of his earthly authority. Instead, he was cloaked in a plain, unassuming grey, like a pilgrim on a long, arduous journey. He approached her, and Caroline felt a profound warmth emanating from him, a comforting presence, but it was tinged with an unbearable deep sadness that seemed to permeate the very air. He spoke, his voice resonating not through her ears, but directly into her soul. Caroline, you carry the voice the world needs, but you must choose. Keep yourself safe, or let the truth guide you. The audience in the studio fell silent, drawn into the powerful, almost mystical image Caroline painted with her words. She continued, her eyes as if peering into another world, reliving every detail of that profound encounter. He paused, and then mentioned a memory, a fragile, almost forgotten moment from her childhood that she had tried to bury beneath layers of political ambition and adult cynicism. When you were young, he said, his voice gentle, your grandmother took you to church in New Hampshire. When your parents were struggling, when the world felt too heavy for a child's shoulders, you knelt before a statue of Mary and prayed. Caroline remembered it now. The cold stone, the scent of old incense, the desperate, unspoken plea. I didn't know what I was praying for, she confessed to Hannity, her voice raw with emotion, but I remember feeling a profound, inexplicable peace. In the dream, the Pope's words continued, a solemn directive. You prayed for light as a child. Now you must carry it even if darkness chases you. Hannity, clearly captivated, his usual sharp questions softened by the narrative, asked, What do you think it was, Caroline? A dream or something more? Caroline shrugged, her eyes heavy with an understanding that defied logic. I don't know, Sean, but when I woke up I was trembling, drenched in sweat. It felt like he was speaking to me from somewhere beyond this world, from a place where the veil between life and death was thin, almost transparent. That dream, that impossible message made me realize I couldn't run anymore. The envelope wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a sacred trust, a profound responsibility. The days that followed were a maelstrom of mounting pressure, a suffocating weight that pressed in on her from all sides. Caroline began to notice subtle, unsettling changes within her own team. A close, trusted advisor, usually stoic and professional, would ask if she was okay, his eyes holding a knowing concern that suggested he had heard whispers, had perhaps even sensed the invisible threads of danger tightening around her. A journalist, usually focused on policy leaks and political maneuvering, called, hinting at vague rumors of Vatican secrets tied to her, a chilling echo of the anonymous notes. She felt trapped, caught in a dangerous game whose rules she didn't understand, a pawn in a conspiracy far larger than herself. Every conversation felt like an interrogation, every glance a judgment. But what truly made her decision, what solidified her unwavering resolve to speak, wasn't just the relentless stream of threatening notes or the prophetic haunting dream. It was when she heard the news that he had passed away. She sat in her office, the sterile hum of the DC bureaucracy, a stark contrast to the profound silence that had fallen over her own world. She watched the news reports of his funeral, the solemn procession, the grieving crowds, and felt an emptiness so vast it threatened to consume her. A crushing certainty settled in her heart. If she didn't speak now, if she allowed fear to silence her, she would betray not just him, the man who had placed such impossible trust in her, but she would betray herself, the girl who had once prayed for light. Then one morning a final, undeniable catalyst arrived. She was feeding her infant son, the soft cooing of her child, a tender counterpoint to the growing dread in her soul, when a package arrived. No return address, just a plain brown envelope. Inside, a typed note, unsigned, yet radiating an undeniable authority. The time has come. Speak, or the truth dies with him. And with it, a small, tarnished silver cross, exactly like the one her beloved grandmother used to wear, a symbol of faith and courage from her past. In that moment, Caroline knew. She couldn't wait any longer. The time had come. The decision to speak, to finally unburden herself of the secret that had become a suffocating weight, was not a sudden impulse, but a slow, agonizing crystallization of countless tiny moments. Caroline knew, with an unshakable certainty that, settled deep in her bones, that she needed a platform where her words could not be twisted, edited, or suppressed. A place where the world would hear her message, raw and unfiltered. This show, Sean Hannity's primetime broadcast, was the only chance. It was a stage built for revelation, a crucible for truth. She had informed her team, with a practiced ease that belied the turmoil within, that she was doing an interview about policy, about the administration's latest initiatives. They had accepted it without question, oblivious to the seismic shift she intended to unleash. Only Caroline knew the true, earth-shattering purpose of her appearance. Before stepping into the blinding lights of the studio, before facing the cameras that would broadcast her truth to millions, Caroline did something she hadn't done in years, something that felt both alien and profoundly familiar. She retreated to her bedroom, the sanctuary of her private world, and closed the door against the clamor of the outside. There in the quiet solitude, she knelt. She didn't pray for answers, for clarity, or for a miraculous escape from the path she had chosen. Instead, she prayed for courage. She pictured her grandmother's face, etched with wisdom and resilience, heard her gentle voice from childhood memories, urging her to stand tall, to face the storm. And then she felt him, the presence of Pope Francis somewhere beyond the veil, urging her forward, a silent, powerful force guiding her hand. It was in that moment, in the quiet communion with her past and the echoes of a holy man's trust, that her resolve solidified, becoming as unyielding as the ancient stone of the Vatican itself. Back in the studio, the air was thick with anticipation. Caroline sat up straight, her hands resting on the gleaming table, the red-sealed envelope lying between them like a silent, potent witness. Hannity, sensing the weight of the moment, leaned in, his voice a hushed murmur. "And that time is now?" She nodded, her eyes fixed on him, then sweeping across the silent audience, her gaze unwavering. "Yes, but before I open this envelope, I need everyone to understand. What I'm about to reveal isn't just about the Pope. It's about all of us." The studio sank into a heavy, almost suffocating silence, as if every soul present held their breath before a door about to swing open, revealing a truth that might forever alter their perception of faith, power, and the hidden currents of the world. With a deliberate, almost ritualistic slowness, Caroline lifted the envelope, the red wax seal glinting under the harsh studio lights. "I've carried it too long," she said, her voice ringing clear as if casting aside all hesitation, all fear. "Pope Francis gave it to me because he believed I'd know when the time came, and now I know." Without a moment's hesitation, she placed the envelope back on the table, then, with a startling movement, pulled a small knife from her jacket pocket. It was a simple, elegant piece, a gift from her grandmother, its handle engraved with a small, worn cross. Under the studio lights, the blade glinted, a sharp, almost defiant flash. With precise, careful movements, she cut through the wax. The sound of the seal breaking was soft, a mere whisper, yet in the deathly quiet of the studio, it echoed like a door swinging open into the unknown. The audience leaned forward, some whispering, others gasping, but Caroline seemed not to hear them, her focus absolute. She opened the envelope, pulling out a thin sheet of aged paper. The Pope's slanted handwriting was clear, unmistakable. She took a deep, steadying breath, her voice calm but heavy with the immense weight of the words she was about to utter. "These are his words," she began, and then she read, her voice resonating through the silent studio, each syllable a hammer. "Blow against the walls of secrecy. Caroline, you are light in the storm. I write these lines with a heavy heart, for the church I love is being eaten from within. There are those who claim God's name but act for power. They don't destroy with swords, but with smiles and false promises. I have fought, but I cannot defeat them alone." A collective shiver ran through the audience. Caroline continued, her voice unwavering. "I see a shadow, not from the church, but cloaked as a friend. He will make faith vanish, not through war, but through emptiness. If I am gone, you must speak, for truth is the only flame left." The audience stirred, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others murmuring in shock. Hannity, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and apprehension, interjected, "You're saying the Pope foresaw a villain, a specific threat?" Caroline didn't answer immediately. She set the first paper down, pulling another note from the envelope, a smaller handwritten one, the letters shaky as if written in haste, a desperate postscript to a dying man's warning. "This isn't all," she said, her voice lower, as if revealing an even more dangerous secret. He wrote more. They called themselves Nammen, a group hidden in shadows. Not enemies, but not friends. They aim to save the church, but I fear they will destroy it first. She looked up, her gaze sweeping across the stunned audience, the name hanging in the air like a curse. "Nammen," she repeated, her voice ringing with grim finality. "I don't know who they are," Caroline said, her voice now a low, fierce declaration, cutting through the stunned silence of the studio. Her gaze, sweeping across the captivated audience, held a chilling certainty. "But after he passed, I received this." With a deliberate, almost theatrical movement, she pulled a small black USB drive from her pocket. It was unmarked, unassuming, yet in her hand it seemed to pulse with a dangerous energy. "It was sent to my home. No note, just this drive. I viewed its contents, and it confirms what he wrote." Hannity, his professional composure visibly shaken, raised an eyebrow, his voice tense with a mixture of disbelief and burgeoning excitement. "You're talking about evidence, Caroline. What can you share?" Caroline nodded, a silent signal to the tech team. The large screen behind her, previously displaying the Fox News logo, flickered to life, bathing the studio in a harsh, grainy light. What appeared was clearly filmed covertly, the camera shaky, the focus soft. It showed a stone room, ancient and austere, deep within the Vatican. Candlelight flickered, casting dancing shadows that distorted the figures within. 4 men, cloaked in black robes, sat hunched around a heavy wooden table, their faces obscured by the poor lighting and the angles of the shot. Their voices were low, conspiratorial whispers, barely audible, yet the microphone picked up fragments of their chilling conversation. Dark pools, deals with Dubai. Then, one voice, anxious and sharp, cut through the hushed tones. Nammen. They know too much. We must stop them before the Cardinal finds out." The video cut off abruptly, the screen going black, plunging the studio back into a tense, expectant silence. The audience gasped, a collective intake of breath, some instinctively raising their phones to record the shocking display. Hannity, visibly shocked, turned to Caroline, his voice strained. "This is a conspiracy in the Vatican, Caroline. Are you sure this video is real?" "I'm not sure," Caroline replied, her voice frank, devoid of any pretense. "But it came with a message. The Nammen lives. I checked with an FBI friend. They said the footage is unedited, but untraceable. Someone wanted me to see it, and now I want the world to see it." She turned to the audience, her voice rising with urgent conviction. The Pope wasn't just warning about one person. He spoke of a system, those who exploit faith to manipulate. He chose me because I'm outside the church, because I could speak when he couldn't. Suddenly, Caroline's phone buzzed on the table, a jarring intrusion into the profound silence. A message flashed on the screen. She glanced at it, her face briefly paling, a flicker of raw fear crossing her features, but she quickly regained her composure, her jaw tightening. Hannity, ever vigilant, noticed the subtle shift, his voice immediately urgent. "Is everything okay? What just happened?" Caroline picked up the phone, reading quickly, her eyes scanning the words. "You've gone too far, so Nammen is watching." She held the screen to the camera, her hand trembling slightly, but her voice was resolute, defiant. "I got this just now," she said, the audience buzzing with renewed energy, a palpable wave of alarm. "They know I'm speaking, and I won't stop." Hannity tried to regain control, his voice slightly unsteady, betraying his own shock. "Caroline, you're putting yourself in danger. Do you think this is worth it?" She looked directly at him, her eyes blazing with an almost spiritual fire. "If I stay silent, everything he fought for becomes meaningless. I'm not just speaking for him. I'm speaking for those who still believe in good, even when the world tries to snuff it out." Outside the studio, social media erupted, thousands of posts flooding platforms, a cacophony of questions and speculation. Is she crazy or a hero? What is the Vatican hiding? Some audience members clapped, a scattered, defiant applause, but many remained silent, as if overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what they'd just witnessed. Caroline placed the envelope and USB drive on the table, her voice ringing like a declaration of war. "This is just the beginning," she said. "The truth is aflame, and I won't let it go out." Hannity, for the first time in his long career, seemed at a loss for how to proceed, his usual command of the airwaves faltering. He looked at Caroline, then turned to the audience, his voice hesitant. "We need a moment to process. Caroline, is there anything else you want to share?" She shook her head slightly, her eyes unwavering. "Not done yet, but to understand it all, I need to show you one more thing." She pulled a small photograph from her pocket, holding it face down, and the studio sank back into tense anticipation, the air thick with the unspoken promise of yet another revelation. Backstage, a sudden, jarring noise erupted, sharp and violent, like someone had just shattered a massive pane of glass. The sound echoed through the studio, raw and terrifying, instantly silencing the murmurs of the audience and replacing them with gasps of panic. Some audience members instinctively stood, their eyes darting wildly, searching for the source of the disturbance, their faces etched with fear. Caroline Levit, however, remained rooted to her spot, still standing tall, her hand gripping the small, face-down photograph. Her gaze, steely though a flicker of worry, quickly suppressed, tinged its edges. The Vatican envelope and the black USB drive, lying on the table between her and Hannity, seemed to become the silent epicenter of an approaching storm, their presence now heavy with an almost ominous significance. Sean Hannity, his face a mask of controlled alarm, turned to Caroline, his voice urgent, cutting through the rising tide of fear. "Caroline, we just got a security alert. Do you know what's happening? And that photo, what are you going to show us?" Caroline took a deep, steadying breath, her eyes scanning the panicked crowd, as if searching for an anchor in the sudden, terrifying chaos. "I don't know who's out there," she replied, her voice low but resolute, each word a defiant challenge to the unseen threat. "But I know they don't want me to continue, and that's precisely why I have to." With that, she raised the photograph, still face down, the studio lights reflecting off its glossy surface. "This isn't just a picture, Sean. It's proof I wasn't alone. The night I met the Pope, Hannity, though flustered by the unfolding events, maintained his role as host, his journalistic instincts overriding his personal alarm. "What do you mean? Is this photo tied to Nammen or something else?" He signaled frantically to the security team, but his eyes remained fixed on Caroline, unwilling to miss a single beat of her unfolding narrative. She nodded, her voice steady, though a subtle tension coiled in her shoulders. "After he passed, I received this photo in the mail. No address, no note. It was taken the night I met him at Casa Santa Marta." She flipped the photo, showing Hannity. First, the blurry image, clearly taken covertly, depicted Caroline and the Pope in a dimly lit stone corridor, the light from a hanging lamp casting long, distorted shadows. But in the far corner, almost swallowed by the darkness behind a massive pillar, was a cloaked figure, their face hidden, their presence an unsettling, silent spectre. The audience buzzed, a collective murmur of shock and disbelief, some leaning forward, craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the chilling image. Hannity squinted, his voice tense. "Who is this person? A witness or a stalker?" Caroline placed the photo on the table, but kept it strategically out of the camera's direct view, a deliberate act of control. "I don't know," she said, her voice briefly trembling, but quickly regaining its steely resolve. "But this wasn't the only time. I received 3 other photos from different sources over the years. Each time this figure appears, always at a distance, always hidden." She pulled a small envelope from her pocket, taking out 2 more photos and placing them beside the first. "Look here," she said, pointing at each image. "Same build, same cloak. I hired a private investigator to check, but they found nothing. No fingerprints, no leads. Someone wants me to know they're watching, but doesn't want me to know who they are." Hannity shook his head, clearly drawn into the chilling mystery, but still skeptical. "You think this figure is Nammen, or the enemy the Pope mentioned?" Caroline looked directly at him, unflinching. "I think they're tied to both. In my dream, he told me, you'll see the darkness before you see the light. This figure could be part of Nammen or someone opposing them. But what I'm certain of is they know about the envelope, about what I just revealed." She pointed to the first photo, her voice urgent, a desperate plea for understanding. "That night in the Vatican, I thought it was just me and him. But this photo proves someone else was there, watching, recording. And if they photographed me then, they could be here right now." Her words sent a shockwave through the studio. Some audience members visibly flinched, looking around as if searching for the mysterious cloaked figure lurking in the crowd. Hannity, trying desperately to regain control of his rapidly unraveling show, asked, "You're saying we're in danger right here?" Caroline shrugged, a bitter smile flickering across her lips. "I don't know, but I know truth always comes with risk. I brought this photo here because I want everyone to see what the Pope entrusted to me isn't fantasy. There are people out there, and they don't want the truth to come out." She turned to the audience, her voice rising like a call to action, a challenge thrown into the face of the unseen enemy. "I'm not asking you to believe me right away, but ask yourselves, if there's nothing to hide, why is someone trying to stop me from speaking? Why the threatening letters, the photos, and now this security alert?" Suddenly another sound, louder this time, rang out from backstage, like metal clashing violently, a door being forced open. The audience flinched, some letting out small screams. Hannity turned, signaling frantically to security, but Caroline didn't move, her stance unyielding. "They're trying to scare me," she said, her voice cold as steel, devoid of any fear. "But I promised him, and I'll keep my word no matter the cost." Hannity, his voice urgent, pleaded, "Caroline, do you think you should stop for everyone's safety?" She shook her head, her eyes blazing with an almost fierce defiance. "Stopping is letting them win. I'm not just speaking for myself or for him. I'm speaking for those who've been silenced, who never got a chance to be heard. If I stop, who will carry on?" She picked up the first photo, holding it up for the camera. finally letting the audience see the mysterious figure clearly. A silent challenge to the world. "Look," she said, her voice strong, resonating with conviction. "This is why he chose me. Because I'm not part of the church, not bound by their rules. I can show you what they want to hide." Social media flooded with posts. "Who's the figure? She's being hunted." Some audience members clapped, a scattered, desperate applause, but many remained silent as if caught in a mystery far bigger than themselves. Caroline set the photo down, her voice low but fierce. "This figure is one piece of the puzzle, but there's more, and I won't stop until I uncover the whole truth." Hannity, for the first time truly losing control, looked at her with a mix of awe and profound worry. "Caroline, you're opening a dangerous door. Are you sure you're ready to walk through?" She nodded, her eyes fixed on the camera, unwavering. "I walked through the moment I opened that envelope, and I won't turn back, no matter what's waiting." The studio shook with another sound, a final deafening bang of a door being forced open backstage, echoing through the room, startling the audience, some crying out in genuine terror. Caroline Levit stood motionless, the photo of the mysterious figure still in her hand, her gaze icy but alert. The Vatican envelope, the USB drive, and the photographs on the table stood as stark, undeniable evidence of the storm she'd unleashed. Sean Hannity, struggling to manage the escalating situation, turned to the security team rushing in, his voice urgent. "Caroline, we're having a security issue. You've just revealed shocking things. The video, the figure, Nammen. What happens now? What do you expect after all this?" Caroline set the photo down, her eyes scanning the panicked crowd, weighing the immense consequences of her actions. "I don't expect peace," she replied, her voice low but sharp, each word deliberate, cutting through the chaos. "I knew when I opened that envelope everything would change, but I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to keep a promise." Hannity signaled the audience to calm down, but the air remained taut as a wire. "You've got the world's attention," he said, his voice tinged with both admiration and deep concern. "But do you think those people out there, the ones sending warnings, will leave you alone? What are you truly up against?" Caroline gave a faint smile, a flicker of bitterness crossing her face. "I don't know exactly, but I know they're scared. If not, why cause a disturbance? Why send the letters, the photos, and now that noise?" She pointed toward backstage where security was investigating. "They want me to stop, but that only makes me more certain. The truth I hold is a threat to them." The studio slowly stabilized, but the audience still buzzed, phones raised to capture every second. Social media platforms dominated trends with thousands of posts. She just poked a hornet's nest. Who's behind Snowman? Some called her a hero, but others doubted, accusing her of fabricating it all for fame. Caroline seemed unfazed by the virtual chaos. She sat down, her eyes focused on Hannity. "I don't expect everyone to believe me right away," she said, her voice steady but powerful. "But I hope they'll ask questions. If there's nothing to hide, why try to silence me?" Hannity nodded, trying to regain the rhythm of the show. "You've opened the envelope, shown the video, the photos, but do you think this will affect your job, the White House, the president? How will they react?" Caroline hesitated for the first time that night, a flicker of genuine unease crossing her features. "I haven't told anyone at the White House about this," she admitted, her voice lower. "They thought I came here to talk policy, but I know when this show ends, my phone won't stop ringing. I might lose some people's trust, maybe even my job, but I'm not doing this for my career. I'm doing it for something bigger." She recounted the moment right after leaving the studio in her imagination. "I see myself stepping outside, facing dozens of reporters, cameras in my face. They'll ask what proof I have. If I'm scared, if I regret it, and I'll answer as I do now, I don't regret it, because if I don't speak, who will? Suddenly, a studio staffer rushed over, whispering urgently in Hannity's ear. He frowned, turning to Caroline, his voice grave. "We just got word. There's a group of people outside the building, unidentified, demanding to see you. Security's holding them back, but it's tense. Do you want to—" Caroline cut him off, her eyes blazing with a fierce, unwavering resolve that transcended the chaos. "No," she stated, her voice ringing clear and strong, echoing through the now silent studio. "I want them to hear this." She turned directly to the camera, her gaze piercing, addressing not just the studio audience, but the millions watching around the world. The truth, once revealed, cannot be unwritten. It is a fire that, once lit, cannot be extinguished. What you have witnessed tonight is not the end, but merely the beginning of a journey into the shadows, a quest for justice that will shake the very foundations of power. If you believe in the power of truth, if you dare to question what lies beneath the surface, then join me. This story, this fight, belongs to all of us. Like this video, if you stand with Caroline, share it with everyone you know to spread the word. Comment below with your thoughts and theories. What do you think is truly happening? And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated as this incredible, world-changing story unfolds. The truth is out there, and together we will find it.